My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran, Sivasankaran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to continue Mahan's teachings on earth, and there's a very important quote that I want to go through in detail. He tries to explain why this seventh principle is really important. And I alluded to the last time on the principle of earth, and I think all of you all have gone through the characteristics of earth and how the 10 important characteristics of the earth as we know from a kind of a scientific perspective, which I covered the last time, and also the spiritual qualities of the earth, right? And I covered this in great detail of this. So on how there are, the earth comes from the sun comes from the various, from the Big Bang or the primordial atom, and you see that the DNA is imprinted across all the way right up to, from the singularity, from the, primordial atom that Swami speaks about, right up to our own physiology, our cells and all the micro level organisms and so on that we live off and they live off us. So and you see that these forces, though it is very important to govern our physiology and a physical body in this material world, there are spiritual qualities that helps us govern our spiritual identity. So we have a material body and we also have a spiritual body. Oftentimes the mind focuses on the material body, but it really doesn't understand sometimes the power of this material world and what's animating and driving and which is underpinning this material world. And if the mind introspects, contemplates, reflects, and meditates upon it, it realizes that the forces that governs this material universe is the same force that governs all of us. And here, the parallels to the forces or the characteristics of earth in its physical form and the spiritual form we covered in detail. So we have a physical body and we also have a spiritual body, and we need to understand the characteristics of our physical body and the spiritual qualities. And that's what I covered the last time. I want to go to an important quote from Mahan, and I covered the last time on the spiritual qualities of the human personality or mind, And here Swamiji alludes to this, in this quote. He says, flawless character. So, and the heart that finds no fault are the signs of approaching a guru. A guru is one who removes us from the state of ignorance to enlightenment, right? So gu means, unillumined state or darkness, and ru is the enlightenment state. So here Swamiji says that if you look at earth, if you look at sun, they have flawless character. They are in harmony, right? And he says that that same characteristics is imprinted in all of us. Unfortunately, we don't dwell deep into our own spiritual divine qualities. And he says that this is something very important, that he says that when we first start, as an ordinary person, we may have anger, hatred, jealousy, greed, all those negative things. And as we start dwelling deeper and deeper and trying to decipher our own spiritual identity and focusing less on other people's business and things out there and focusing on ourselves, this process of, selfness, trying to understand the self, you see that slowly, the gross qualities, the negative qualities starts dissipating. And you will realize it yourself, maybe, your speech has been very harsh. You see that, or, sometimes, all the suprabhadams come out, all the negative or the kind of words that are not supposed to be spoken comes out. And you see that over time, you become more gentler and more graceful. And you can feel it actually. Hey, before I used to say all kinds of things. Now I'm more calmer. I'm more, the words are more kinder. And you see this a lot so you can actually experience it. You will know that some of the flaws that you have starts, changing, and you become, more and more refined. So he says that when you know that the flawless character and the heart, you would stop finding faults with things. Before there are, times you always find faults with other people and other things. And over time, you really have no more time for that. You just focus on self-development, self-discovery. And slowly, slowly, as you gravitate and go deep within ourselves, we see that we start approaching the guru, that which animates, that which powers us. In that same way, we saw that in the earth where there are layers. As long as we are in the surface, we are impacted by gravity. As we go deeper and deeper, you see that the level of the impact of gravity starts dissipating. So here, Mahan is explaining this, that, as we go deeper, our qualities, our flaw starts transforming and it starts dissipating. And we see that, our heart becomes more gentler and more kinder and more softer. And you know that you are getting to the state of the guru. The guru here is that you're moving from that unenlightened state to the enlightened state. You see that the mind becomes more, the mind becomes more, focused on within oneself. And, and when it starts focusing within oneself, the level of enlightenment and, bliss becomes more intensive. You see that, that state of understanding becomes more clearer. So he's explaining this in this quote. Then he goes on to explain that love, helping nature, and eagerness are signs to receive the grace. So he sees that you start permeating unconditional love, helping nature. That means you are one with nature. You're connected with nature. You become nature-centric, right? And eagerness. So you have this enthusiasm for life. You do not regret. Yes, we made mistakes. It's okay. Let's move on, right? And that unconditional love and the nature-centric and this enthusiasm, the awesomeness and the inspiration tells us that we are, inspired by the grace. We feel the presence of the grace. We are slowly becoming connected to the grace, and ultimately we become the grace. So there's a beautiful saying in Tamil, Avan Arulal, Avan Tal Vanangi, he says, by his grace, that divine grace, we learn about the grace. By that grace, we experience that grace. By that grace, we know everything is part and parcel of the grace. And finally, we become the grace. So here he beautifully says that, this unconditional love, the nature-centricness, the enthusiasm of life, and, the life experience, opens us up to, the wider grace, that universal grace. And this is really important because there is a beautiful saying, I'm sure all of you all know this, this Newton's law, every action has an opposite and equal reaction. The more unconditional love, the more nature-centric, and the more love we have for our lives, we see that reverberates, and the return on the unconditional love comes back, and it reinforces, and you become positive. You become, more universal, and you see that dynamism between the dynamic, impact reinforces one another, and you see that you're always the state of bliss, sharpness, and have always the universal outlook. No matter what the circumstances, no matter what the issues are, you're able to find the solutions. No matter what topics are, you're able to provide some insights. You become more and more universal in your perspective, because This, there are times that when somebody asks a question, suddenly the answer comes, or you're thinking about, things, and suddenly you get the answer to it. That tells us that our mind has become more and more universal, and it's tapping to this universal force that is make up this universe, that is part and parcel of us. And this is the first sign that you are receiving and you're connected to this grace. And you feel that blissful, Swamiji says, Summa irukum sugam. It's this beautiful, graceful, nice feeling that no material things can ever give you. So Swamiji is describing this beautiful harmony. And he goes on to explain this universal identity. He says that giving alms, giving alms means, you're no more thinking of your own self. It's from the selfness to that self-realization, to the selflessness, selfness to the selfless. Selfless means now you transcend beyond your own needs, beyond your needs of your own family, needs of your neighborhood, to a much more wider, that people you really don't know, that you feel that unconditional love. And you give alms here means, giving people, the support, food, being, doing charitable things, sympathy, and penance. Penance means the sacrifice. You're willing to sacrifice for, the cause of others. And you see that sacrifice for the well-being and welfare of others, sacrifice for their safety and security, sacrifice for equity and justice. And you see that that is part and parcel of self-realization. So he sees that he gives this continuum of this, selfness, selfless, self-realization. So you become more and more realized of the power that is within you. So he's explaining this beautiful, stages of our evolution. Then he goes on to say, this is quite interesting. He says that marriage, fame, and contentment leads to a higher knowledge. How does marriage lead to a higher knowledge? And this is something that one needs to ponder, right? And you see that, we are all individual beings. And as individual beings, nature has inbuilt in all of us this, self-centered, desires to fulfill our needs. So this is, every animal has that, from bacteria right up to we Homo sapiens, right? So this whole idea of individualism, so we are all individuals and we look after our individual needs. And that's what every, animal does, but what happens here is that through this jnana process, acquisition of this wisdom knowledge, we see that the strength of this individual is because of the power of the indivisibility that is embedded in that individual. So that indivisibility gives us that nothing can separate. We are all one and connected, right? And this is where we see that the human consciousness, that like an animal which has got an instinctive, self-centered, meeting its needs, the moment it lifts its game through this process of introspection, contemplation, reflection, it realizes the indivisibility within itself. And what happens is that it now transcends from that selfishness to the selfless. And part of the selfless is that, when we have our own families, when you are single, you look after yourself, right? When you get married, now you have a partner that you now need to synchronize and balance your life around. So your orbit now extends from who you are as an individual to now becoming, the orbit now has to harmonize with the spouse. If it doesn't, then you have a problem, right? And this is where you have a lot of conflicts and all kinds of challenges. from that spouse, then you have children. Now you have another dimension that comes in, that you need to synchronize and harmonize, like another planet coming into the system, and you need to start harmonizing, right? And you see that the more children you have, the more you start harmonizing, right? So this union of marriage enables us to experience new things. In that experience, we get higher knowledge of how do we manage not only our own emotions, but also the emotions, the feelings, and the needs of others. The same thing, Swamiji speaks about fame. Fame is also, you see that fame, in not in that negative sense, that fame, that there's enthusiasm to be successful, to be a good surgeon or good doctor or good teacher or good, that push towards wanting to be the best, right? And I think everybody should have aspirations to give their best. At least the best aspiration is to realize oneself, right? So that aspiration, gives one that push towards acquisition of knowledge, right? If you want to be, like Einstein, somebody who's here, fame means somebody who's had an impactful life, right? And to achieve that, one needs to, that push, that drive, that enthusiasm to achieve great things. And that requires acquisition of higher knowledge, right? The third aspect is contentment. This is peace, harmony. When we have contentment, when we are contented with our lives, you see that, we are able to then learn. We don't compete with anybody. The problem with most people is that they want other people's lives, right? They say, oh, that person, but they don't appreciate their own life. I see even among parents, they compare between children. Oh, that child is smarter than this child. The neighbor's child is better. So all this comparison is not very fruitful. So one needs to be contented with what one has. And all of us are blessed with, a fantastic thing that nature has given us called existence. Nature has not given us everything, but nature has given all of us something special. And when one realizes that, when one becomes contented with oneself, you see that whatever you have, you give your best. If you are a teacher, you give the best. If you are a gardener, you be the best gardener. If you are somebody who's, cleaning the vicinity, you become the best cleaner. So you see that when that contentment is there, you always are in search for knowledge. How do I make it better? But the moment you start comparing with other people, we start mortgaging our intelligence, right? And this is where we don't progress. So here, Swamiji, in these three important things, he says that marriage, we learn something. Fame, we have an aspiration to achieve something great, that greatness and that contentment are key to acquisition of that higher knowledge. The higher knowledge is the knowledge, wisdom knowledge. The next one he says here is that sacrifices results in waste of food and money. What is he talking about? Here, he's talking about the sacrifices that people make, with all the rituals, right? In Mahan's time, there are many, many places where people burn clothes, burn food, burn all those things to give to a higher, being. And what Swamiji says is those sacrifices are actually a waste of food and money. He says that channel those sacrifices to the needs of the poor. If somebody, if we are pouring, various things to supernatural forces, Swamiji says that these are all wasting money. Why don't you take that resources and give it to the people that cannot or don't have that food and money? So again, he says that, so this is based on, we should transition from rituals, the achara, to vichara. So again, there are times that, we want to do things, for something far, supernatural. This great saints and sages that if you want to serve divinity, whatever you are going to give away in this form, give it to the poor. Give it to a family that doesn't have milk to feed the child. Give food for the poor. If you have a lot of money, give some money for the education and the support of others that cannot do it. So here Swamiji says that, instead of giving something that we have never seen, something supernatural, give something to the natural beings that are part and parcel of this universe, that through this support are able to lift themselves up. So here, somewhat like what the earth is. The earth supports everybody, right? The saint and the sinner, the pauper and the prince, right? So imbibe the quality of nature to be able to support, different people with different needs. Here again, Swamiji reinforces, he says, the service helps us to speak of what you have seen or distributed, what you have earned. So you see, sometimes we see, we learn things, we have ideas, and one of the things that the best we can do is, as part of the service, is to teach others how to do this. I've learned Mahan's teachings and Mahan's meditation. A part of the service is to pass this message back to others who may find this knowledge useful. So whatever we learn, speak about it, give people inspiration, give them that the push to say, yeah, you can do it, and show them how to do this. And also sometimes we are fortunate that, we have acquired material wealth. We're able to create, good employment and good resources. We're not going to take it with us. Everything has to be left behind here. And our families don't need everything, So why don't we distribute and give the people that actually need that support so that they too can develop themselves, have that peace and tranquility to realize their true potential. So here Swamiji talks about service as part of that spiritual journey. He also speaks about yoga is the effort to keep the body sound and strong. So here, the physical part of keeping the body, strong, exercise, meditation, all these are very important to ensure that the body is strong. If the body is strong, the body can, take that opportunity to realize itself and also help and support others. So if the earth is not strong, we see that, the support it gives to everything that is leaning on it becomes more challenging. In that same way, as we develop ourselves, we are somewhat like the earth, supporting not only us, supporting our families, supporting the neighbors, supporting the community, and supporting the country, as we become strong, mentally, physically, spiritually, materially, we contribute to the country's economy. We pay taxes, the taxes are used to support the country. So we see that there is this reinforcement that one needs to ensure that we keep our body and our mind, our intellect strong. So again, think of ourselves as the earth. It's how many things live on earth. There are many things, both microbes and also people that depend on us. And how do we keep ourselves, as best as we can to be of service to others. Here, Swamiji also speaks about jnana and intelligence leads to understanding everything. So again, the acquisition of this wisdom knowledge is really, really important. It's quite interesting that, I always say that allocate always a time for ourselves every time in the morning for introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation every day without fail. But allocate a particular time for you to do introspection, to read deep knowledge, even if it's a passage, Let it reverberate in your mind. Let it resonate in your mind. Absorb the essence of it. Let the mind and the intellect absorb it. And you see that half an hour of the mind that gets that nourishment will percolate the whole day, that you'll always be, strong, fresh. You'll be able to sleep well. You'll be able to do things very well. You'll be able to think. So a few things that we cannot not do. This morning, allocating a time for ourselves to, enhance our wisdom, knowledge, and intelligence. You can not do other things, but this is something that we need to do because it will enrich every facet of our lives. Read, great books, read the Upanishads, read the, the works of great masters, saints, and sages, including work of Mahan, and you don't need to read the whole book, just take a passage and let it simmer. And that is why every morning I try as best as possible to write something in the morning so that it helps me to reverberate. And I hope that those who are, I hope all of you all are reading it so that you too, in the morning, have that reverberation. And in the reverberation, it unlocks your jnana and intelligence to understand everything. Then Mahan goes into this next aspect. What if you don't do this, right? He uses a more stronger word there. If you look in the book, I think the choice of the word in the translation is could be more refined. In there, in the direct translation, it is a much more cruder and a coarser word that's used. So I've kind of refined the word. So I call it unillumined people. Most often, they have no understanding of the wisdom, knowledge, nor do they have any respect for this, men of wisdom. So when you don't have respect and reverence for men of wisdom, it's hard for one to acquire that wisdom, knowledge that the person is trying to propitiate. So when you love something, you really then spend time with it. So here he says about the unillumined people that respect not men of wisdom, that neither acquire the intelligence. So here he says that, they don't acquire that intelligence, even approaching the guru, and nor respect them will cause untold hardship to the people. So here he says that the unillumined people are dangerous people because, they can cause a lot of difficulties and challenges to themselves and others. And particularly if you have, partial knowledge. And we see this, we see a lot of conflicts, a lot of turbulence because of the unillumined state of who they are and the state of others. So the lack of universality makes people very individual, and when they become more individual, they take on to dogmatic belief systems and try all their lives to convince others. So when you have belief systems can be very different. And this is where you have the differences that causes that wedges between people, between various segments of society. So when you're illumined and you're more harmonized, you see that how do we make the best out of what the resources that we have. So here he says that unillumined people that respect not men of wisdom, they don't acquire that knowledge of wisdom, they can cause a lot of difficulties. So let us not be in this category. Allocate some time every morning to acquire the wisdom, knowledge, so that every day we become more and more illumined, not only of who we are, but also have greater appreciation of the people that are in our lives and the greater society. So, and this is then he comes back to this: in a heart full of love and goodness, action and intelligence shine alike. So here he's saying something very, very profound. He says that, when we have unconditional love and that goodness, that gracefulness, our action and our intelligence become one. The gap between action and intelligence starts getting smaller and smaller until it becomes zero. What that means is that every action is intelligence-driven action. It's not impulse, it's intelligence. Impulse sometimes can get us into trouble, right? Intelligence means we have introspected, contemplated, reflected, and meditated upon every thought before we action. Everything that we say has been thought through very, very carefully. So again, he says that this unconditional love and goodness, reduces the gap between action and intelligence until they become one. So this is Mahan's quotes. And what does this all mean? And why is this in this chapter, right? What is Swamiji trying to teach us? The essential knowledge of this principle is that understand that the divine power, the unarvu of the earth, the vibration of the earth that gave rise to our body, we can call it Mother Nature, right? Understand the power of Mother Nature, right? Both from a physiological and a spiritual perspective, from a material perspective and a spiritual perspective. That material perspective is core to our material being. The spiritual perspective is core to our spirit or our beingness. If we know the two of them, then what it means is that let the divine power of Mother Nature resonate in us, right? So which both our physical body and our spiritual mind is resonating with this power of this Mother Nature. That's why I always say that we have immense power of Mother Nature. We don't need to beg or borrow from anyone. We have that inner resource in us that is abundant. All we need to do is go to that bank through this process of introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation. And when we do that, be one with Mother Nature. We become one with Mother Nature. And when we become one with Mother Nature, we're able to unlock our natural state of our existence. Unlock the natural state of our existence. When we do that, life becomes awesome, universal, and in harmony. And this is what Swamiji's message is in this principle. Sandoshi.